Ladies and gentlemen, hey, hi, how you doing? Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. Within Warzone right now, over the past couple of seasons, we've seen a handful of updates or changes to various different other parts of your loadouts besides the weapons is the main focus here, right? So obviously we talk about the primaries and the secondaries and the best TTK and the lowest recoil all the time. What we don't spend a ton of time talking about though is your perks and equipment. There are others of the loadout, the remainders. And with this, there's actually been a lot of evolutions, I guess, lately in terms of what the true best options are between the rest of your loadouts. So today, I wanted to focus on some newly updated information that we've seen throughout the past few major updates within Warzone and talk a bit more about what you maybe should be using or switching up on your preferred loadouts to optimize them for your style of play. So a few things here are a bit more straightforward. Other ones are a bit more in depth. I think tacticals is probably the most straightforward category out of everything today between tacticals, lethals, and then all your perk categories. I think really mainly there's two options here that are the most viable. And unfortunately, that means that there's not much parity going on. It's a lot of spam of the same equipment, but smokes first and foremost, I think are by far the strongest tactical you can run because pretty much they are the answer for everything. And that's why I've been running smokes on, of course, all the loadouts that we talk about here on the channel for some time. If you need to rotate from point A to point B and you need some concealment or some on-the-go cover, if you will, you can drop a smoke. It's going to obviously ruin aim assist for others that are aiming on you. It's going to hurt yours as well, so you can't really fight in it, but it's going to make it easier for you to rotate without getting, beamed from someone on top of a roof or something, right? If you need to revive a teammate, you can throw down the smoke. You're going to have that cover or that concealment to then get that revive off. It is the answer for all your problems in Warzone, basically. You gotta move, you need cover, you need to res, you need to reload, you need to loot, drop a smoke on it, you'll be good to go. It's gonna rely on enemies hitting random shots in a smoke to take you out, and that's why I think this is by far the most dominant out of all of these. As opposed to stuns, yeah, it's gonna stop an enemy from moving, but they can still end up shooting you, they can still see you, they can still ping you. Same deal with flashes. Yeah, they might be blind, but they can spray and pray and still hit shots there, right? Snapshots, all right, but I don't think they're the most useful considering how much cover there oftentimes is that's going to block them. The only other tactical that I think is worthwhile is the stims, because obviously you can start that instant health regen. However, you could also combat this by using certain perks, and these are of course limited in how many you could use, so that's sort of a drawback inherently. Plus, they're not the OG Warzone 1 stims. Yeah, you get a slight movement buff, but it's not going to be anything crazy. They're helpful, they're useful, but truly, I think the tactical category is still dominated by smokes. So like I said, this is probably the most straightforward, the least, changing part of this video, if you will. Smokes been the answer for some time, still are the answer right now. Now, lethals is a bit more in depth because there's actually a lot of options here that have been updated as of late that you really can go back and forth with depending on what you're playing. Now, if you are primarily a resurgence player, I still think knives have a huge upside simply for those finishes. Of course, you get that instant finish with your knife, you get the ping on your radar, you know where the enemy's teammates are, and you don't have to waste bullets, you don't have to run out of ammo, then force a reload off of a finish, right? They're just super efficient for that, and that's specific. For normal gameplay though, unfortunately, knives got that hard nerf where they can't one-shot down a player unless they get a headshot, which I'm not gonna lie, I think is a bit of an over nerf. It's a high skill gap scenario. If you're landing a throwing knife from multiple meters out and you hit them in your chest and it breaks their armor, it's super annoying to run into, and it does definitely, bring knives back in line with other things. So it's an annoying balance for someone who likes to spam knives, but it's also a really effective balance at that. But for resurgence, I think knives stand out the most, but they're not the only viable choice here. For one, stickies are always going to be solid, or semtexes. I'm not sure why they changed the name. Forces players to move. If you actually do stick them, it's going to be a guaranteed knock. So that in and of itself is obviously very effective and a little bit more straightforward. C4 is one that absolutely has risen up in popularity lately. This was spammed a lot during the initial rounds of World Series of Warzone. You see a lot more pros using this on their loadouts as of late, and there's a reason for that, despite the fact that this has actually been nerfed. A couple weeks back, all anyone was using in late game scenarios was C4. You'd have squads running this and stacking it in their inventory so they could throw 10, 12, 14 C4s in a fight if they needed to, and technically squad wipe without shooting a bullet. And that's because the C4s were so strong that you could essentially throw one, hit somebody with it and they would be one shot from that point on. Now they have gone through and they have updated this. So with the season 4 Reloaded update, we did end up seeing an adjustment to C4 where the max damage is no longer 275. So that's what was making players one shot. If you were to hit a C4 on somebody and deal the max damage and they had full health, they'd have 25 HP remaining, which most weapons in the game are going to do more than 25 damage in a close range fight. So they'd effectively be one shot, right? The outer damage was also decreased to 100, but what this means is that C4, while it's not going to be crazy anymore, it's still going to be ridiculously good because obviously 300 health being the max damage being 200, the outer damage being 100. Quick math for you, 300, it still has the chance to be a two-shot knock. So if you throw both of your C4 at once and then detonate them together and one does max damage, one does, minimum damage or outer damage, that's still gonna one-shot knock or one explosion knock a player, right? Or if you throw one, break their armor, throw a second, and you do anywhere between the outer damage or the minimum damage and then the max damage, it's still that second C4 gonna knock that player and then also potentially deal damage to anyone that's around them as well. So C4, a little bit slower, a little bit clunkier than something like a knife or a Semtex, also doesn't have the extreme range of like a Semtex or a frag or something. These are still going to be incredibly effective even post nerf, especially when you get to late game scenarios. If you have a secondary loadout where maybe you start off using knives or stickies or something, but then late game you grab a second loadout and you have C4 ready for when everyone's getting pushed into a small circle, it's building versus building or whatever the case is, these can be incredibly lethal, pun intended. So those are very viable. The other newest standout here is actually thermites, and these can be incredibly useful as well. You obviously can throw these very far. If you stick a player with these, you'll be able to have that sort of burn effect that lasts and can knock players very easily. This can counter things like riot shields. If you throw it on the ground, it's going to also catch them on fire and sort of make them panic. And if you throw this in the general vicinity, maybe you don't stick somebody with it but they run next to it, it's also going to let you know where a player is. So these can almost, in a sense, kind of work like a snapshot in a different way. Obviously snapshot's going to show you exactly where the enemy is and highlight them, but this lets you know, okay, my thermite landed against the roof, they're in a few meters of that, I know where they're going to be in this building, so I can push that effectively. Or if you need to finish somebody or someone's maybe going to try and stick a res, you throw this down to that knocked player, it's going to finish that knocked player, but if someone was reviving them, it's going to catch them on fire, and now they're weak. These can be used incredibly effectively as well. So rather than just having a very one-dimensional lethal category where everyone's using throwing knives for insta finishes, now depending on how you play, maybe what map you're playing, thermites, knives, and C4 really stand out as just being very effective. And now let's talk about perks, because there's also some things here that I think a lot of players have adjusted as of late as well, and some things you might want to be on the lookout for. As we get into this portion of the conversation, quick reminder, if you are new to the channel, every single day I got you covered with really everything you need to know about Call of Duty, so feel free to hit that subscribe button to stay up to date. And if you enjoyed this video or if you find it helpful at all, do me a favor and drop a like. It's always really appreciated. So for perks, if you guys watch the loadout videos, you guys know I have my set 4 that I pretty much always run, and I don't really differ from this because this plays really well into my play style and what I value the most. I'm always running Mountaineer, Double Time, Tempered, and Flex. And in addition to this, in game, I'm also always trying to get a medic vest so I can get those faster revives off or faster self revives off at the same time. That to me is the most effective combination for my style of gameplay, run and gun, oftentimes jumping off of buildings, and as someone who's very prone to fall damage in previous CODs, having Mountaineer is great for that. It basically negates that. I don't have to worry about the fall damage nearly as much. Tack, sprint, and slide cancel obviously being a main part of the movement meta. Double time plays right into that. Tempered, allowing me to get to 300 health and not have to worry about spending time plating up, is huge for me. Whether you're playing close range or long range, if I can only plate up twice and get back into a gunfight faster at 300 health, I think that's going to be great. And then also Flex, I don't use any tuned audio or anything like that, so it lets me hear enemy footsteps way better, and I do notice a drastic difference. But also Claymores and Bettys are spammed a lot. Having Flex delay those explosives is huge. Teams will often post up and they'll be stacking, top of the stairs in prison on Rebirth, and they have Bettys and Claymores down. Okay, no one's gonna push us. We got 3 Bettys on the stairs. If someone's running up at us, it's gonna blow them up. Not me. I'm running right past that. I'm gonna take you out, and then your other guy sitting in the corner is gonna take me out, but it won't be the Bettys, and I'll have won that moral victory, right? But this works really well for me. In perk 1 though, I don't think there's that many that are super valuable. Sleight of hand is one that I know a lot of players like to use. This though, keep in mind, is a different efficiency on every gun in the game. Sometimes sleight of hand will increase your reload speed and it'll make you reload a gun faster. Other times though, it's a difference of like a few milliseconds. It's not really that much faster and it doesn't hold a ton of weight. So if you know you're using a weapon that has a painfully slow reload like an LMG or some shotguns or something, yes, sleight of hand would work well for that specific loadout, but this is not a universal perk like double time or like Mountaineer would be. You also have things like EOD, which yes, are very effective with stopping explosives from knocking you, but especially with the meta right now, people like to spam multiple at the same time. That's not always going to save you that much. And then Irradiated is really the only other one outside of double time and Mountaineer that I think is valuable in really any sense, because you can end up taking less gas damage and you get a movement speed increase. You also can equip armor plates and whatnot when you are taking gas damage and things like that. So this can be really useful in specific situations. This is another one where you probably don't want to have this as a universal perk or a starting perk. Instead, you have a second loadout saved with this on a different perk package, so you can swap to that if you need it later on in a game. The perk slot 3, or really what is perk 2, ends up having a much smaller pool of potential perks, but I do think there are a couple here that stand out a ton. Tempered, like I said, is obviously great. You don't have to spend nearly as much time plating up. The most popular alternative to this though, being quick fix, is basically the inverse. You spend more time plating but less time healing in a sense, because as soon as you end up getting knocks and whatnot, or you start putting on plates, that health regen is going to go. So killing players or inserting a plate immediately starts that health regen. This means that in fights, the second you knock somebody or the second you plate up once, you might be like 25 HP or something, that's going to immediately start regenning. Whereas with tempered, yeah, you can be one shot with your health. You can have 25 health left, and then you put on 2 plates and you're getting that plate health back. You're good to go there, but your base health is not regenning necessarily right away. It's going to have that standard slow regen that this game has. So it's kind of a pick your poison type of deal. Do you trust that you're going to be able to get that knock off in time to start that health regen, or do you trust that someone's not going to be pushing you when you are plating to actually keep that health regen going? Or do you just want to inherently spend less time plating up? For me, it's a matter of, I want to shoot my gun. I want to be able to have a chance in a gunfight, and I want to lose because that person outgunned me, not because that person shot me while I was trying to plate. So to me, spending less time plating is more valuable than getting that instant regen, but both of these are incredibly strong. The other options here, maybe outside of resupply, not that effective. And resupply this year is incredibly slow. Recharge equipment over 50 seconds. You're better off just carrying a utility box or looting an enemy there than relying on this all that much. And then everything else here, really maybe cold-blooded in certain situations so you don't get spotted on some stuff, can be all right, but I think it's largely dominated by tempered and quick fix in the perk 3 slot. And then perk 4 is easily the most competitive out of all these, because there's 3 in specific that really stand out and one that I think is incredibly underrated. So as mentioned, we already talked about flex and how important this is. Ghost, because of how easily it is to get a UAV or a portable radar or something in this game, incredibly valuable as well. Now, you do obviously have to match your loadouts and match your teammates with this as well. If you're reusing Ghost, but you have a Casus break on your primary, every time you shoot, you're going to show on the map. So if you're using Ghost and you're not using a suppressor, you're making this perk kind of useless. You basically always want to be using a silencer whenever you're using this to match up. Also though, if you're standing by your teammates and you play with your squad a lot, you're stacking, right? And they don't have Ghost and someone calls in a UAV, sure, you get the element of surprise. Hey, there's not 1 red dot here, it's actually 2 players. But if you're trying to play the stealth route, your teammate's going to give off your position unless they're also running Ghost. So there's a bit more coordination involved with running Ghost that I think is kind of obnoxious for me personally. High alert though, also incredibly valuable, incredibly strong. You're gonna know when someone is looking at you, and that's gonna give you the chance to react quicker in that gunfight rather than them shooting you first and then you have to turn and find them, right? So that's incredibly valuable if you're someone who maybe is a bit more passive in your gameplay, or on the contrary, always rotating around. If you're someone who's pushing a little bit more, flex, probably a bit more valuable, just because if you're going into buildings, there's going to be equipment, you're going to hear footsteps around you. High alert's more of, hey, I know players are going to be in this area. If they look at me, I want to know. I think, again, it's a matter of your preference, a matter of your play style, but all 3 of those are incredibly valuable. One that I think doesn't get enough love, though, is Resolute. And I notice this the most when I get specialist bonus, like specifically on Rebirth. Having the ability to get that better movement speed when you're taking shots is crazy. It allows you to escape from gunfights. Now, unfortunately, I don't think this is more valuable than Flex, than High Alert, but it is something that is incredibly useful in those specific situations. And part of the reason why I think having Specialist bonus is so valuable, this is one that you instantly notice, hey, I'm getting shot and I'm trying to run away and plate. I am moving and grooving right now because that movement speed increase. So that's one kind of slept on that also can be really good, but it's a bit more niche and unfortunately is more of a defensive perk rather than being an offensive perk like maybe Flex or High Alert potentially as well could be. So that's kind of my general overview of what to look out for now in your loadouts, maybe what to change based on how you're playing either as a general playstyle, maybe you're always a bit more passive or you always rely on something like C4 or that, or things to adjust over the course of a game. You start off with perk 1, 2, 3, 4, but then you switch to a different perk package that optimizes things for late game where the scenarios and the gunfights do change. Definitely important, I'd say, to have more than one perk package so you can go through and adjust things as needed. But that being said, that's kind of how the general other elements of a loadout are playing out right now. Definitely some evolution since the start of the game and since we've really gone in depth on these last time. So if you enjoyed the video, if you found this information helpful, do me a favor, drop a like. It's always really appreciated. And if you're new to the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button on your way out to guarantee you're always up to date with all things going on in COD. But once again, thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time, take it easy, have an awesome rest of your day, and I'll catch you later. Peace out.